All right. Good day. I'm Martin Gago with Market Radius Research. It's Monday, March the 27th, and we've got CEO Greg Fenton of Zentek joining us. Zentek is a graphene and nanotechnology research and development commercialization company. And Greg will be discussing the commercial launch of ZenGUARD and its technology platform and other emerging opportunities for the company. But please remember, this is neither a recommendation nor investment advice. We're here to learn about the company. Greg, thank you very much for taking the time to meet with us today. And why don't you tell us about Zentek?
My pleasure. Thanks for letting us be on today, Martin. Yeah, Zentek. So for your new viewers out there or people who haven't heard the story before, Zentek is a Canadian intellectual property development and commercialization company with a focus on next generation nanomaterials, specifically graphene. Graphene is really, it's a brand new nanomaterial. And when I say brand new, it was only discovered about 20 years ago. And it's simply just carbon in its nano form. But when you get carbon down to basically one or two layers, it starts to exhibit spectacular properties. The properties, everyone's probably familiar with graphite. Graphite is literally just millions and millions of layers of graphene stacked upon each other. And the importance is once you start to peel off those individual layers of graphene, they start to exhibit really spectacular properties. It's 100 times stronger than steel. It's more conductive for electricity than heat than copper. It's bendable, it's stretchable, it's got a very large surface area. So when you take graphene and add it to existing products, it makes them better. It makes them stronger. It allows them to do things that they couldn't do before. And graphene is really going to play a role in nearly every aspect of human life as we know it in the future, including things like impacting the water we drink, the food we eat, the air we breathe, the vehicles we drive in, so electrification, cars, but even existing cars that use fossil fuels, the fuel we burn. We can utilize graphene to make fuel burn more efficiently. Graphene can be used on the roads and bridges that we use. It will be involved in medical treatments we seek. So it truly is a wide-ranging wonder material that is going to be a part of everybody's life in the future. So who are we and what do we do? Well, simply we know graphene. We know how to make it. We know how to get it into products, so existing products or developing new products. And then we ultimately protect the technology around that know-how through patents. And that's right at the top. I said we're an intellectual property development and commercialization company. So we develop the technology, then we protect it through a patent. I'll walk you through that process in just a moment with our first commercial product that we have in the market. But the most important thing about that is that our proprietary innovations, so what we create with graphene, give our commercialization partners a huge competitive advantage over their competitors by making their products better, by making them stronger, by making them more conductive, by making them safer, and really, really important in today's world, we can make greener products. Therefore, meaning that there's less waste, there's less pollution, and because we're dealing at the nanoscale, and I keep coming back to this, a little bit of graphene goes a very, very long way. So that's the who we are and what we do. We're a publicly traded company. We have roughly $150 million US market cap. We have no debt. We have roughly 100 million shares outstanding, and we had $14 million in cash as at December 31st, 2022.
All right, Greg, and maybe we're addressing this later on the deck, but graphene, we know, you know how to make it. And I guess just fundamentally, is your graphene sourced, is it synthetically produced from hydrocarbons, or is it So mined out of the earth and then processed to get into the graphene state.
It's the latter, Martin. So basically we take graphite that I alluded to earlier, and we expose it to, there's three different processes that you can utilize to make graphene. We're focused on a derivative of graphene called graphene oxide. So that's where we get oxygen functional groups on the surface of the graphene or the carbon. And we do that by exposing graphite to a chemical process. So we expose it to a number of different chemicals, and those chemicals basically get in between the individual layers of carbon and cause them to separate off the graphite stack. When they do that, they leave oxygen functional groups on the surface of the carbon or the graphene. And that's really important, and it's a great distinction because it's those oxygen functional groups or active sites that allow us to add additional elements to the surface of the graphene to make them work in the different products that I talked about. So we'll do something different to the surface of graphene oxide for corrosion versus what we would do to it for an antimicrobial. Okay, so you would put something else on the surface of the graphene attached to those oxygen functional groups, and that gives it its unique characteristic and allows it to work in whatever product we're looking to functionalize it in. So we take graphite, we make graphene oxide, then we customize that graphene oxide for a specific end use.
So essentially, I'm no chemist or physicist, but you've got the graphene and then you've got some oxygen atoms sort of on either side of it, and then other things can kind of bond to the oxygen so that you have things attached.
Not on the other side. It's actually on the surface, on the planar surface of the carbon itself. Okay. The oxygen functional groups are attached to it, and they've got active sites that other things can basically grab onto. Okay, there's different ways to actually get it to bind to the surface.
Yeah,
it's those active sites on the surface of the graphene with the oxygen on the surface that we can attach our antimicrobial to, or our anti-corrosive agent. That's how we functionalize this. We talk about functionalization. That's how we functionalize the graphene oxide.
Gotcha. And that is fundamentally sort of the foundational technology of what Zentek does, is separating it and then putting that, and then all your other products are based off of creating the graphene oxide in that way?
All of the products are based on graphene oxide. That is correct. There are different forms of graphene. There's graphene nanoplatelets, which is effectively between 10 and 50 layers of carbon atoms. Remember, we're down at the 1, 2, 3 layers. Yeah. That's when you get into graphene. And then if you use a different process, like a mechanical or a thermal process to do the exfoliation to separate those layers, that's pure graphene. There hasn't been a technology to scale that to a commercial level at this point. But when you do that, then those products will be very, very conductive, for example. Right now, when you separate it using chemicals that we talked about, you get graphene oxide, but those oxygen sites on the surface don't allow an electron to shoot across the surface. So you have to reduce those number of sites to get it down to a much purer form of graphene if you want to have high conductivity. So it just depends what end product you're going after and what characteristics that you want determines the type of functionalization that you utilize on the surface. Now, we don't produce our own graphene oxide right now. We source it from third parties, but we will be integrating that production capability over the next, I would say, 12 to 24 months. So we will be producing our own in the next 12 to 24 months.
And you have it outsourced right now, but is it your proprietary technology doing that, or is it your partners, or a combination between you and theirs?
So to be clear, where the intellectual property that we are creating is that functionalization on the surface. So the graphene oxide comes in from a third party. It's their technology to produce the graphene oxide. Okay. It's then, what do we do with the graphene oxide? That's where our scientists are literally working on dozens and dozens of different functionalizations, just depending on the products we're looking at. And then when we get something that works, we file a patent around that intellectual property, and that gives us our protection. So the graphene oxide is really just an input into our secret sauce.
Gotcha. So if you could find a better or cheaper provider of graphene oxide, you could switch vendors on that and still do your technology upon that.
That's correct, and that's why we want to be vertically integrated. So we don't want to be reliant on third-party supply chains, and so we want to have the ability to produce our own graphene oxide, and we will be doing that. As I said, our hope is to be in that position in the next 12 to 24 months.
Excellent, thanks.
You're welcome. So how do we work? Again, we look at interesting opportunities. We do research. We work with 120 researchers across Canada, the US, and around the globe. And we really look at, problems. We're problem solvers. What is a major issue? For example, the pandemic hit. There was a need for products that could be responsive to the SARS-CoV-2 virus. So we saw a problem. We thought, could we utilize the unique characteristics of graphene oxide to come up with a product that could be utilized in the fight against the pandemic? Identify the problem, do some research, work through the development, the second box on the left there. So what products can graphene enhance? We saw surgical masks, personal protective equipment. We thought if we could get an antimicrobial agent onto a surgical mask or personal protective equipment, that could enhance the safety profile of the personal protective equipment. We also thought, since HVAC filters are made from a very, very similar material to surgical masks, perhaps we could put an antimicrobial coating onto HVAC filters and increase the protection that HVAC filters gave users. So we identified a problem. We went through the development phase. We created a product that works. We filed the we filed a patent to protect the intellectual property. And then we started working with the market to get those products to market. We got approval, Health Canada authorization in September 2021 for our antimicrobial product on a surgical mask. And we've begun to commercialize that, and we're ramping that up. We're looking to get approvals, so regulatory approvals in other jurisdictions around the world. On HVAC filters, I'll walk through that in just a moment, but the same thing. We've gone through, we've demonstrated that this is a huge value added for the indoor air quality space. And now we're working with commercialization partners subject to getting regulatory approval, which we're in the middle of getting right now. And that's our business model. We identify a problem, we develop a product, then we work with commercialization partners to get it into the marketplace.
All right.
Okay. So with that, right at the top, you talked about ZenGUARD. That is our first commercialization product. That is our antimicrobial coating that was really born out of a need when the pandemic hit in 2020. We basically had all of our research capabilities were shut down. We only had our own lab in Guelph. So we really wanted to make a difference in the fight against the pandemic. So we talked to our scientists and asked them if they could come up with a product that could be utilized as an antimicrobial coating. As I explained a little bit earlier, that we could put onto personal protective equipment that would make it better and safer. So that is really the essence or how this whole movement towards the antimicrobial coating started. So once we did that, we developed it for surgical masks, for personal protective equipment. Then we realized that there was a significant opportunity in the indoor air quality arena. Much, much larger opportunity. And again, this really only got highlighted during the pandemic. And it was realized that HVAC systems were actually becoming spreaders of the COVID virus because the filters they were using in existing systems didn't have the the proper ability to filter out the SARS-CoV-2 virus. So it would somebody would cause or cough or sneeze near an HVAC intake vent. That would get pulled into the system and spread to a much wider audience. So we learned that infections occur through the transmission of viruses and wet aerosolized droplets, cough droplets, sneeze droplets. And again, HVAC systems weren't designed to remove those. So you needed higher rated filters, and they could remove more particles from the air. But the trade-off is that you then restrict the airflow that goes through it. So what is the implication of that? You need to have substantially higher energy requirements in order to force the air through a filter. So higher energy consumptions, emissions, and operating costs associated with it. So most HVAC systems, or at least many HVAC systems, didn't have the ability to use higher rated filters, so it wasn't an option for them. So given that indoor air quality is critical, and energy efficiency, and there was limiting emissions and reducing capital costs. So there was a significant problem. You were getting this mass spread of the COVID virus, and existing HVAC systems just weren't designed to handle it. Then came along Zentek with our ZenGUARD coating. So here's some statements from the experts in the industry. Again, ASHRAE, they're basically set the standards in the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning space. They talked about improved indoor air quality, obviously brings substantial health and economic benefits from a broad public health perspective. And achieving and maintaining good indoor air quality should be included in all decisions that affect the design and operation of buildings and HVAC systems, including efforts to improve building energy efficiency, sustainability, and resiliency. That's coming right from the experts themselves. So here is what the numbers say about the indoor air quality opportunity. We identified the problem. We know what the experts say. It's a massive problem. There's going to be $168 billion is the annual economic burden for poor indoor air quality in the United States. That's the costs associated with low productivity due to absenteeism, employees coming to work being sick, etc. Obviously, the children, we got to pull at the heartstrings a little bit, but it's a massive issue because if you look at the major issue, kids were being kept out of school because of the spreading of COVID during the pandemic. So it was a major, major issue on our children. And the cost is estimated of absenteeism is estimated to be greater than $10 billion due to respiratory infections. Okay, so significant issue. So I've sort of laid out what the problem is. Well, then we come along with our ZenGUARD product. What is it? So this is our patented, happy to say patented. So we took it from an idea on the blackboard right through to full patent status. It's a highly effective antimicrobial technology platform. And you notice we use the word platform because it's not just specific to HVAC filters. It can be utilized on personal protective equipment, face masks, gowns, booties. We can also use it in a number of different areas, and we're exploring a number of those as we speak. We think that ZenGUARD could be utilized in at least 4 or 5 different applications. So it truly is a platform technology that we've developed. And what does it do? It makes existing products safer. Now, to go back, we talked about graphene oxide. We spent a little bit of time talking about how we get the oxygen functional groups on the surface of graphene oxide. Graphene oxide itself is hydrophilic. It means it's water loving. It likes water. It attracts water. It's an efficient carrier of silver ions. Very, very important because silver ions are antibacterial, antiviral, and antifungal. So these create natural antimicrobial properties, okay? We use a when we talk about the antimicrobial functionalization of the graphene oxide, we take a very, very unique form of, we call it complex silver. So it's different forms of silver, and that's what we're attaching to the graphene oxide, or the oxygen functional groups on the surface of the graphene. And that, once we attach it, now you've got a sheet that brings in water. And remember that pathogens travel in aerosolized droplets. We bring in those droplets, it gets attracted to the surface of the graphene oxide. Then the silver, our complex silver, we know is an antimicrobial. It then goes to work on the pathogen, whether it's a bacteria or virus, the COVID virus, etc. And that creates the antimicrobial effect. Okay, that is key, because we take in those droplets, we capture them, then we kill the pathogens. And that's why we see a substantial increase in the reduction of pathogens that go through a ZenGUARD coated filter. Okay, so you just take a regular filter, you put the ZenGUARD coating on it, and you get a substantial increase in viral and bacteria filtration efficiency.
All right. So just you've got your graphene oxide with your functional groups on there, and I guess the silver, the complex silver, is attached to those functional groups, and then that is the antimicrobial that then attracts the water droplets that have the bacteria and the viruses and so forth on it.
That is precisely correct.
Okay.
And the wonderful thing about that, Martin, it's not just specific to the SARS-CoV-2 virus. This works against, we've tested it against 30 something pathogens. I forget the number now. There's just been so many of them. So we've tested them against gram-negative, gram-positive strains of bacteria, antimicrobial resistant strains, so they're really hard to kill stuff. We've tested it against fungi. We've tested it against a number of different viruses. It worked against everything, because it's the same mechanism of action, disrupting the cell wall and basically destroying its ability to replicate. So it's a very, very powerful broad spectrum compound that we've developed, and we've got the patent for it.
All right.
Okay. So we've identified the problem. We know what the experts said. We have our compound. Now we had to demonstrate that this worked in the real world. So in December 2021, the government of Canada, through Innovation Solutions Canada, put basically a call for proposals to the Canadian corporate world to come up with ways to improve indoor air quality, given the issues that would have been identified through the pandemic. So as part of that program, you needed to be able to achieve three different things. One was a net reduction in airborne viral load. So was your product efficacious? Did it reduce the amount of pathogens in the air? Secondly, there couldn't be any modifications to existing HVAC systems. So no additional capital costs associated with it. There couldn't be any reduction in flow rates, or the inverse, increase energy use. So it had to be efficient. It had to be a green solution. So it had to be efficacious, couldn't be additional capital costs, and it couldn't impact the energy requirement of the HVAC system. And it had to be done in a very safe way. So you couldn't be saying, look, it's great, we're flushing bleach through the system, but obviously bleach would be hazardous to people's health. It had to be safe. Okay, so those were the conditions. So we started in that challenge. We were awarded, there were a number of companies that participated in it, starting in December 2021. We started testing in January of 2022, and we completed it in April 2022, and we were successful on all four fronts. So we were able to achieve a substantial reduction in the viral load. There were no additional capital costs required, because remember, we're just putting a coating on the surface of a filter. We had zero impact to the airflow rates, because remember, and this is the beauty of graphene and graphene oxide. We're talking at the nanoscale. So when you put it in water dispersion and spray it on a filter, it just wraps around the existing filter media. Okay, so it doesn't cause any clogging or agglomeration that will require higher airflow. So it didn't impact energy use, and we demonstrated that it was completely safe. So we were successful, and we were able to go to phase 2.
Sorry, and just I know you said it, I just missed it. When was this phase 1 completed? Those sort of 4 check marks checked off?
That was completed in April 2022.
Okay, so about a year ago, not 11 months ago.
About a year ago. And that allowed us to move to phase 2, which was basically proving it up in a real world environment. That was lab testing. So now you needed to prove it in a real world environment. A lot of times there's inventions and products that look great in the lab, but when you get them out into practical reality, they really don't pan out. So what happened was they basically created a mocked up classroom. They took a portable classroom, and it was constructed to simulate a real world environment. So you can actually see it in the picture there. You see desks that replicated where children would sit. You've got the air intake at the back there through the filter. You can't see the other side, but there's the teacher's desk. So they would introduce the pathogens there, have them move through the room. They get drawn into the air ducts and pulled through the filter. So there was a surrogate. It obviously wasn't COVID, but it was a surrogate virus, was aerosolized in water droplets like we talked about, because that's how we know pathogens are transmitted. There was a particle size distribution that was optimized, again, to replicate real world life as if they were being expelled from the human respiratory tract. The air samples were taken. You can see the different areas within the classroom to represent the real world conditions. And what did we achieve? So this was done through the National Research Council of Canada. So again, independent third-party validation of this, and Kremco Laboratories of Ottawa. They tested ZenGUARD on MERV-8 filters. Okay, so we coated a MERV-8 filter, and then there was an uncoated MERV-8. And all MERV stands for, it's the minimum efficiency rating value of a filter. The higher the number, the smaller the pores, and the more particulate can be filtered out of the air. Most classrooms, buildings, homes, etc., utilize MERV-8s. Okay, so you could go to a MERV-13, it would give you much smaller pores, but as we talked about earlier, then you would have to substantially increase your energy requirement. Your current home furnace, or most building furnaces, wouldn't have the ability to withstand that, because there would be more pressure. They would have to operate at, there would be higher capacity, higher load on them, and they typically break down. So we wanted to test this against what the majority of the existing infrastructure would utilize, and that's a MERV-8 filter. So the requirement was a reduction in viral load. We passed that, 1 air exchange. The ZenGUARD coated filter removed almost 35% of the pathogens versus an uncoated filter, which only reduced the pathogens by 7.24%. So we almost had a 5-fold increase in pathogen reduction with our coated filter versus an uncoated filter. So think about that, 500% more pathogen was removed from the air due to our coating, which is absolutely unique and never been seen before with something like this.
Is there an equivalent MERV filter that would accomplish the 34-35% viral filtration?
You have to be careful when you start talking about these numbers, because there's humidity, there's airflow rates, there's particulate size, there's a lot of different variables that go into it. But that starts to approach a MERV 12 to 13 based on the size fraction that we were testing, which was a 3 micron or smaller, okay, which is they call it an E1. So that was the efficiency. And for a MERV 13, which is basically removes all of the COVID virus, we're at the MERV 12-ish, we'll call it. I don't want to say exactly one way or the other, but we're approaching that. Okay, so that gives you an indication that with our coating, you're starting to improve for that specific size fraction. You're starting to improve, approach a MERV 13 in viral filtration efficiency.
Okay.
Okay. So there were no modifications to existing HVAC systems. Again, we achieved that utilizing a MERV 8, which is the most commonly used air filter in North America. There was no reduction in airflow rates or increase in energy usage. Obviously, we ticked that box, and no reduction in air quality. So again, the ZenGUARD filters don't shed anything into the air. They're completely safe, and we showed a 5-fold improvement, which is absolutely unprecedented in the marketplace. Again, the power of nanotechnology and graphene.
All right.
So simple, unique solution. We continually talk about it being a simple, elegant solution. We reduce viral load, no additional capital spend, and no additional energy requirements. There are other ways to mitigate these things in the marketplace. You can have a new enhanced HVAC system, but it would be obviously cost you significantly more and likely require additional energy. You could do additional air exchanges, but that's going to impact your energy. You can utilize air purifiers, but you got to buy the air purifier. It's going to be additional energy, UV lights, etc. These are some other technologies that will assist in this regard. But from a pure economic perspective, the ZenGUARD solution ticks all the boxes.
All right.
So that's ZenGUARD. That is us taking, again, identifying a problem, which was the SARS-CoV-2 virus, working with our scientists to develop a product, and then working with our commercialization partners to actually get it into the marketplace. We identified it. We were able to optimize the surface chemistry of the graphene oxide to a point where it was, again, achieving results like that speak for themselves. But that's our business model. And ZenGUARD is our first commercial product that we're actually taking to market now. So that gives you a sense of our business model. We have the idea, and we bring it all the way through to commercialization. Being patent protected, that intellectual property is ours. We own it. We'll be protected for 20 years with it. And now we're moving down the regulatory path in numerous jurisdictions around the globe. Okay. We opened our ZenGUARD production facility in June last year. It's a 26,000 square foot facility located in Guelph, Ontario. That's where we actually produce the ZenGUARD coating. We can produce up to 26 tons of our ZenGUARD coating per annum with our new system. We also put in a world-class spray system. You can see it there on the picture that's a little bit on the right-hand side. That was just installed and commissioned. So that's where we would actually take the raw media, the uncoated media that would go into a filter or a face mask, run it through this spray system where we apply our antimicrobial coating, and then it goes into an oven, and there's a process that we utilize to actually adhere the graphene oxide coating to the surface of the material. And that's a picture of it. The picture on the bottom here is the actual AGGO or ZenGUARD production machinery and equipment. So this is one of the largest nanomaterial production facilities in the world that we're aware of. We are probably the leader or one of the leaders in this space in commercializing graphene-based solutions or products. And we have the industrial capacity with room to scale it up further as demand starts to build here.
All right.
So
Greg, Sorry, before we go on to the next, can you just, I guess for visuals, can you just go back a slide? So what you talked about your business model. Are you going to be in the business of selling air filters, or are you going to sell like 26 tons of the ZenGUARD coating? Are you going to sell the coating to other people, or are you going to take other people's filter and coat it for them and then they'll sell it? How are you, because you did mention earlier you work with commercialization partners. What is the business model you see for monetizing this?
So there's probably two parts to that, Martin. In the early stages, because it is a completely novel compound, graphene itself is novel. Having an antimicrobial agent based on graphene is even more novel. So we made a decision that we would need to be able to create a proof of concept and demonstrate to the market that there are end markets for this. And we needed the ability to be able to produce, demonstrate that this could be produced at scale. So that's why we took the decision to actually invest in capital equipment to be able to produce it. And that's why we put the spraying facility in as well, because again, you're applying a nanomaterial to a fabric. There's not a lot of experience historically in this area, so we needed to work through this. So in the early stages, as we are right now, we are taking that on and we are doing that ourselves. But ultimately, as we start to get traction in markets, which we're starting to do right now, we will then look to a model where the end customer will likely provide us with uncoated media. We will spray the media. So we'll produce the ZenGUARD coating, put it onto the media, ship it back to them for inclusion into their existing filters. We are not a filter company. We don't make filters. We're not going to distribute filters, but we're going to work with that existing distribution capability that's in the market to add our coating to their existing products and getting it into market. Remember, with our coating, you don't change the filter. You're not changing the physical nature of the filter, not the size, not the shape. It's all we're doing is putting a coating on it. So we can put that onto the raw media, give it back to the filter manufacturers. They put it into their filters and then sell it to their clients. That's the model.
Okay, so you're going to be okay, you'll be like an outsourced coating provider to the existing filtration companies, the filter.
Initially, and as this scales and gets larger, then we'd be looking to do licensing agreements as well, because when you get into very, very large scale, there are other groups that will likely want to do this themselves and take advantage of their own internal efficiencies in producing it and getting it onto product and from logistic perspective. But that's sort of the phase 2 or 2B.
You're providing your partners a lower risk path to try it out, to do market testing and so forth.
Correct. That's exactly correct. This is
and then in the future, you would sell them barrels of ZenGUARD where they can spray it on themselves.
That's right. Yes, exactly.
Okay. With, I guess, in terms of a pricing model, how much does this add to the cost of an existing MERV 8 filter? And are you pricing it to be kind of equivalent price to a MERV 12, or any thoughts on how that sort of pricing model will position the product?
The model will be dependent on what we're doing with a specific partner to get the product to market, right? We can buy the media, coat it, and provide it to them. They can provide us with their media, coat it. There will be obviously an upcharge. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. There will be an upcharge, obviously, because of the cost of the coating and getting it in, but we're going to be highly competitive, again, against what's in the market currently. If we can get the performance up to the level of a MERV 13, we want to be able to do it in a way that's incredibly more efficient than having to go to more sophisticated air handlers with the increase of 15 to 20% in energy costs, plus the 2 to 3 times more expensive MERV 13 filter. So there are substantial savings going the ZenGUARD route. There will be an upcharge over an existing MERV 8, but we haven't landed on exactly where that is right now, and that's what we're working through with our partners.
And for the target market, do you think your target market would be like existing MERV 12, 13 filters and replacing them so those guys could have lower energy costs since you wouldn't have to have the build up as much pressure, or would it be sort of an enhanced MERV 8 kind of solutions where schools go, hey, we can spend a bit more money, get kind of better air? Do you have an idea of where your target is, or a bit of all of that?
What a fantastic question. And I haven't been asked that question except internally because we talk about this a lot. So we are going to be able to offer the entire spectrum, and we're actually doing testing, and we get asked, why are you continuing to test? And that's what we're actually testing. We're actually testing across the entire spectrum of MERV ratings so that we'll be able to go in to that school and say, you're currently using a MERV 8. Well, if you use a coded MERV 8, you're going to get performance of X up to a MERV 12. And that might be fine for them. That might be what they're looking for. Or we can go to the building manager who says, I absolutely need to have a MERV 13 performance with respect to bacteria and viral filtration efficiency. And we can say to them, well, we can code a MERV 9 or 10 and get you to that MERV 13. So now those are two completely different customers with different objectives. And some will be some will be purely safety based, others will be economically constrained. For example, school systems don't typically have the budgets to be able to put in new air handlers and pay for much more expensive filters. So, but we can offer them a MERV 8 enhanced or a MERV 8 plus, like you talked about, where they're getting that 500% increase in viral filtration efficiency by using a ZenGUARD filter. So, great question, and we're going to be able to offer it even going down below a MERV 8 because there's a lot of situations that use filters below that, and there's issues with mold and bacteria and whatnot, and so we're going to offer an entire spectrum, and even above a MERV 13 when you start getting into the HEPA range, right? And that's up to a MERV 17 and above. But our coding will work on that because remember, it's at the nanoscale. So even a HEPA, which filters out 99.97%, you put our coating on it, then you're actually killing the pathogens as well. So we will have a suite right across the spectrum.
All right, thank you.
Okay. So our pipeline, these are under development. Obviously, the ZenGUARD, we are commercializing personal protective equipment. We have approval. We are starting to sell that product. The ZenGUARD for air filtration, we just spent a fair amount of time on. We did make an announcement recently on Zen Armor, our corrosion protection coating. This is something that is very exciting. We think is going to be a very, very big winner for us. We've developed, again, different functionalization of the graphene oxide that we talked about that can be utilized as a pigment into existing paint systems. And we've had independent third-party testing validate and show that we are better than the existing best-in-class systems that they've been utilized. And corrosion is a huge issue around the planet, from infrastructure, whether it be bridges, buildings, water pipes, gas pipes, your car, huge issue, impacts everybody. And it's just an absolutely massive market. And we're getting very, very strong feedback on our product. And we've already started working with some potential end customers in this area. So we think this one could be in the market very soon. Ice-phobic coatings, again, we can utilize graphene in a different way, put it on the surface of a structure that doesn't allow ice to accrete to it. Or if ice accretes to it, it doesn't take very much pressure to actually shed the ice off. Obviously, in northern climates like we are in Canada, and there's lots of other areas around the globe, icing is a major issue, whether it be on drones that we show here or wind turbines that generate power or on ships. So very, very big market here in the ice-phobic coating. And we have a product that is, again, demonstrating best-in-class statistics when we're it's being evaluated by independent third-party testing. We're working on a graphene silicone anode battery technology, so a next generation lithium ion battery technology. Again, graphene's got substantially more energy density or capacity than graphite has. So there's huge promise from utilizing graphene in batteries and its storage capability. We've got a diesel fuel additive that we're working on, and that's shown very, very significant improvement in fuel efficiency. And this is, we're talking about existing hydrocarbons, again, adding a special form of graphene oxide. It's been doped differently. You add it to fuel, it makes fuel combust more efficiently, higher energy release per energy of fuel, and it reduces the greenhouse gases because you've got a more efficient burn. So that's something we're really excited about. There's some work ongoing in that area right now, and we hope to have some news into the market in the not too distant future. So graphene, the central theme here, and we've got that little hexagon in the middle. That's the shape of graphene. It's basically the lattice connected of carbon atoms. And all of these things are possible out of it. These are all of the things that we think we could commercialize in the future. Some of them obviously much sooner than others, but it truly is. Graphene is the backbone. It's the key for building a healthier and more sustainable future. So that's really the Zentek story, our business model, our first commercialized product, and then what we're looking at commercializing in the future.
All right. Where is your business in terms of the ZenGUARD masks? Is that sort of authorized to be sold with sort of making claims and so forth in various markets? And has there been much adoption with that? So
the ZenGUARD masks are currently only authorized to be sold in Canada. So each jurisdiction, I shouldn't say each, but many jurisdictions around the globe require their own regulatory pathway for approval. We obviously went in Canada first because we're Canadians and we understand that market, and we went through that process. We are now in process of having the masks approved in other jurisdictions as well, the US being the big one through the FDA. That application is in process right now. Again, it's a regulatory process, so I don't want to comment on timelines. There are a number of other jurisdictions around the globe that we're currently exploring, and we'll be putting out some news in the not too distant future on some developments in those areas. In Canada, because we have a universal healthcare system, when the pandemic hit, there was really a real overbuy of product. Basically the Canadian system, many of the hospitals and buying groups bought enough for 3+ years worth of inventory, because remember at the time there were such shortages. Even though we have a better product, they still have to churn through that inventory. So the adoption in Canada has been a little bit slower than we had hoped, but that's actually starting to ramp up now. Those procurement cycles are turning over. We're being evaluated in a number of hospital systems right now, both in Canada and around the globe. So we expect to see, the take up of masks. And again, we're really focused on hospitals, acute care, long-term care facilities, not retail, not the general public. But we do expect that to start accelerating later this year.
Can you comment on roughly how much more expensive the ZenGUARD masks are than to regular masks? How is that sort of positioned in the market pricing wise?
You're really talking about a few pennies at most.
Okay.
Yeah, right. It's very, again, we're very, very sensitive to the price point. And again, a little bit of graphene goes a very long way. So we're able to be very, very competitive and not price ourselves out of markets.
Okay. And are you doing the coating of the masks yourselves, or are you shipping the ZenGUARD to the mask partners to do that coating?
So we are We do utilize a third, and so our coating facility that we just built it and has just been commissioned. So we were utilizing a third-party coating group out of the US, and we will continue to use both. We're going to ramp up, obviously, our coating capacity, but we anticipate not having enough capacity on our own to be able to do, filters and masks and everything that we need to do. So we'll continue to work with third parties to supplement the coating that we need. And then hopefully it just gets to a point where we'll be utilizing all third parties to do it.
Gotcha. Okay. We got a bunch of questions here. I want to hit just a few more things before we get to the audience questions. I appreciate your time, Greg. You got a healthy balance sheet, but you've also been spending and investing a lot of money into the business. And I guess this sort of ties in with the timeline of the ZenGUARD filters and so forth. Can you just talk about the timeline, your cash and kind of your burn rate, and are you cashed up enough to start to execute this business plan fully?
Yeah, we think we are, Martin. We had spent fairly aggressively on building out we had a big capital equipment spend, both on the spray system and the ZenGUARD production facility. We entered into a long-term lease for the York Road facility. So we did spend, we raised $30+ million a little over a year ago, with the intention of spending it on the build out of the ZenGUARD production facility and the spray facility. Remember, also our business model is to invest and partner with researchers around the globe. So we have to invest in different programs, technologies to bring those along. But most of that heavy spending is now done. We've actually been very prudent with our cash. We saw the storm that was on the horizon about a year ago, and we actually started scaling back our spending programs. We did have more ambitious spending programs, but we actually started taking action about a year ago to cut back our spend based on that. We are managing our headcount very, very efficiently right now. And we do have our spending down to a fine-tuned instrument. So we do believe that we're in a great position to get us to at least cash flow neutral, if not cash flow positive, based on everything we're seeing about adoption in the market, the products that are coming online, and the current amount of cash that we have on the balance sheet.
And what are the main milestones for the filters going out when you, it still looks like you're in a state of construction here. When is your first product going to come off the product line, and when do you start to see commercialized revenues?
I don't want to give exact timelines, and the reason for that is we are still seeking regulatory approval for the application of ZenGUARD onto filters. Okay, so
yeah.
but remember, that is through a branch of Health Canada that gives that approval. We've already had approval for this product on surgical masks in Canada. So Health Canada is very familiar with the product. They've gone through, they've analyzed it, they know the safety profile. It's just another group within Health Canada that has to give their approval. But because it's being used in a different way, there's supplemental testing that needed to be done. And that testing, when that data is all provided, and then they'll make their decision. We don't anticipate having any issues, but it is a regulatory approval process. So I can't tell you exactly when that's going to be. But what I can tell you is that our business development team is working 24/7, working with HVAC partners and end customers on developing that piece. So once we have that approval, we're ready to go.
All right.
So we're following that same process in the US market through the Environmental Protection Agency as well. They're responsible for regulatory oversight of this type of product on HVAC filters. And we're doing it globally as well.
And your facility, how close to, let's say if you had authorization today, when would you be able to actually be in production?
Tomorrow.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay.
It really is. We are running batches through it right now, small batches. But again, given some of the products that we have, we don't want to utilize, so we have a fairly substantial inventory of graphene oxide ready to go. We're not turning it all into ZenGUARD, again, because of some of those regulatory timelines, and we do have some other products that could be potential users of the graphene oxide as well. So we're hedging our bets a little bit, again, because we think the pathway to commercializing our Zen Armor, for example, isn't nearly as long as ZenGUARD if you take it from the beginning when we actually created it, because of the regulatory pathway required. So we want to make sure that we're in a position that when any of these markets kick in a substantial way, which we expect them to do, we're ready to service them.
All right. I'm going to audience questions here. Any expectation on commercialization of Zen Armor prior to Government of Canada testing completion? And then as well, a second part to this, any update on testing hours of the Zen Armor?
So again, I think they're referring to the ISC challenge. We announced a little while ago that we won an Innovative Solutions Canada challenge, similar to what we went through with the ZenGUARD on the HVAC filters. We won another challenge for testing our Zen Armor product. So that's fantastic, because through that process, the government, you partner with different groups within government. They test it out for their specific needs, whether it be for airplanes, bridges, boats, whatever it might be. If it's proven up through the process, then they become a potential customer for the product, which is great. But that process will likely take 6 months to a year to complete. That notwithstanding, we are moving at light speed to get this commercialized in other areas. So we are talking to a number of potential end customers and intermediaries, so groups who actually produce existing paint systems, existing anti-corrosive paint systems. So we're actually working with a couple of groups in that space and a number of potential end customers. And there's different testing protocols that they need to go through, but some of that work's already started. So the Government of Canada will not be or that ISC challenge won't be the determinant of when we actually get commercialized into market. That could actually happen much sooner.
All right. In regards to the SpinCo, and I guess we didn't talk about your graphite asset, and I presume this is what it's referring to. In regards to the SpinCo, can you give us some update on to this? Any status on that?
Sure. We are moving along with spinning out the Albany asset into a separate company. That work is underway. There's obviously a significant amount of legal work associated with that, and obviously moving it into a separate company, then taking that company and getting it listed on an exchange. That is our plan. There will be additional news coming out in the next little bit here that will discuss further milestones and the plan laid out as to what the next steps are in that regard. So again, that is going on in the background. The lawyers, the accountants, the tax advisors have all been involved. There's obviously a number of different boxes we need to tick there, but that's all happening, and there will be an announcement made in the not too distant future on that.
Are there a question here on the cost to develop the Albany project, and how much money may need to raise for that? Or any ability to comment on that right now?
I can't comment on that, given the fact that the preliminary economic assessment associated with Albany was the last 43-101 compliant report was the PEA of 2015. That is now dated. It's too old to talk about. That information is available still in public records, but we just can't speak to that as an indication because again, it's dated, and we will be updating a lot of those numbers as part of the process to spin Albany out and move it forward. There is some work that's going on in that regard right now.
would you can't give specific timing, but just sort of general broad timing on the Albany, would that be like a Q2 event where we should get some more news, or is that more the back half of this year?
I would say, yeah, it's going to be sooner rather than later.
Okay.
Yeah, our intention is to get this spun out and listed as quickly as possible. There is substantial interest in North American battery metals, including graphite. There are, there's numerous studies that are showing there are going to be significant shortfalls of battery metals, again, including graphite. There's more graphite in a lithium-ion battery than any other metal, up to 10 times more lithium in many cases. So there's a significant shortfall coming. And I can tell you, because I have talked to a number of the battery manufacturers, and they're talking about their difficulty in being able to source battery metals, and their just the number of gigafactories alone that are being built in North America. There isn't enough graphite to satisfy their needs at this point. So that was one of the reasons that we undertook spinning Albany into a separate company so that we could get it out and continue to develop it. We are not mine builders. We're not, that is not our area of expertise. Our area of expertise is taking graphene oxide and making products better. So we thought by spinning it out, we could actually fund that separately, continue down that path. And we wanted to do that because of the very, very attractive supply-demand fundamentals and where we think the price of graphite and our very, very unique form of graphite. Remember, our graphite was formed very, very differently than just about anything else on the planet. There might be one or two other deposits outside of North America. This was formed by a magmatic event. It was carbon basically in the Earth's mantle that came up. It created this very, very special form of graphite that is ideal for use in potentially batteries, fuel cells, etc. It's got high thermal stability, high corrosive stability. It's got very, very good conductivity. So this starts to, I don't want to call it synthetic, but a potential replacement for synthetic graphite. And synthetic graphite has a horrible carbon footprint, requires a tremendous amount of energy, and we've got a natural form that could start acting as a substitute to synthetic. And obviously synthetic commands a much, much higher price. So we think all of the balls are lining up for the Albany project. We're incredibly excited about it, and I can't wait to see where it goes, because we think it's going to be a real winner for us and our shareholders in the next couple of years.
All right. Question here on the ice-phobic coating. I get stating that had you made that the ice-phobic coating would be in the market by the end, before year end, and did that happen? Or I guess it hasn't happened. Could comment on the timing of the commercialization as ice-phobic?
Yeah, sure. The ice-phobic coating, we've demonstrated, we've been working on this for 2+ years now, and we've demonstrated again a best-in-class product for ice phobicity. And ice phobicity is measured in the number of kilopascals required to dislodge ice from a surface. And once you get below 100 kilopascals, it's considered to be ice phobic, and the best products in the market were ranging somewhere around 50 kilopascals. Ours is down as low as 15 to 20 kilopascals. Again, absolutely blowing the best products out of the market. The issue is it's a new product, and there's a lot of testing that is required. So we show drones here. So it's one thing to show that you can dislodge ice from a drone blade, but there's significant testing that we had to do, that third parties has to do, but then end users have to do. And we're trying to manage commercializing the ice-phobic coating with ZenGUARD for PPE, with air filtration, with corrosion, and it becomes a priority juggle for us. We have limited resources. We have enough, and the key, as we all know, is making sure that we have enough cash to get us through to being cash flow positive. So we had to take a reprioritization of everything we're working on, and we allocate more resources to those products that we think have a higher return on investment. So the amount of capital, whether that be human capital or dollar capital that goes into it, we are constantly looking at that and determining which ones have the higher ROI for us. So products move out of the prioritization, they move up and down the prioritization scale. So we're working with partners, we're working with a number of groups in the icephobic space, but that went down a little bit because some of these others, just given the size of the market and the ability for us to get these products to market much more quickly. So sometimes the timelines will shift around a little bit, and that's why we've stopped trying to give timelines on commercialization and when it's going to hit. We don't talk about exact dates anymore because there's this constant reprioritization that's going on internally. But then we've got, again, when you talk about icephobic coatings on drones, well, that's going to require regulatory approval because this is something that flies, and Transport Canada is going to have to come in and, basically set a standard for it. If it goes on a wind turbine, for example, well, that's a different product, but then that needs to be tested in the field. So there's always elements of this that are moving around. So again, our top priorities right now are air filtration, personal protective equipment, corrosion protection. Icephobic continues to move. We have 2 partners we're working with now, and we continue to move it forward. When it will be commercialized, again, I'm not going to give a timeline on that.
All right. And I guess in terms of other products, there are 2 questions here, and we're running a little short on time here. So try to do this quickly. Your medical ointment or the topical compound, any comments regarding that status? Again,
that became a prioritization issue as well. We did some initial safety testing on that compound, but what we needed to do to move that forward was to take a specific indication, whether that be psoriasis or acne or seborrhea dermatitis. And then we basically had to come up with a specific loading for that and go through a series of testing so we could prove up the safety profile, but it had to be on a specific formulation of the compound on a specific indication. And that investment is fairly large. So we took it as far as we wanted to take it. We've put a pause on it right now until we have line of sight to being cash flow positive again, because all of these things are a fairly substantial drain on resources. And we want to make sure that we're managing our shareholders' capital prudently and moving them along at the pace that we think is appropriate in order to get them to market. The topical, you're probably talking 3 to 5 years if you went full speed ahead, develop the product before probably talking 5 years before it would actually be a product in the market. Well, 5 years, that's a long time, and you're probably talking tens of millions of dollars in development work. And we're just not in a position to be going full speed on that right now. So we do continue to move it along, but at a slower pace while we're allocating resources to these other areas that are going to generate cash flow more immediately for us.
All right. Just a couple left here. Do you have any lawsuits?
Do we have any losses?
Lawsuits. Any
lawsuits?
Yeah.
There was one lawsuit outstanding from the former CEO of the company. I won't make any comments on that. We do disclose that in our financials. That continues to progress. There was a lawsuit filed by him, and we filed a countersuit back, and that continues to move through the process. There was also a claim made about an infringement on a patent infringement. And again, that hasn't progressed. We haven't seen anything on that in over a year. So again, nothing new to disclose on any of those.
All right. And just the final question here, how much graphite does it how much graphite does it take to make a ton of graphene?
A ton.
So there's no losses on it, or the like?
No, it should, there might be a little, but that, a rule of thumb, it's 1-to-1. Graphene oxide, remember, to make graphene oxide, we're adding oxygen functional groups, and it's typically 20 to 30%. So a ton of graphite could make probably 12 to 13 tons of graphene oxide.
Oh, okay. All right.
Okay.
Well, we should wrap things up here, Greg. Any final comments? And I guess you have mentioned some timeline things, but I guess in the next, I don't know, quarter or two, what are the key milestones people should be looking for? I guess some news on Albany, some news on the progress of the air filters. Is that anything else, or more specifically?
Yeah, I would look for, again, we got to be careful in what we say, but I would look for updates on progress on all of the products that we're working on, including in the PPE, mass space, air filtration, corrosion, even in the icephobic area, the Albany for sure. Obviously, everybody's waiting for announcement of commercial partnerships and deals, and we will, when the time is appropriate, we will make such disclosures to the marketplace. But we do anticipate pretty heavy news flow in the coming months.
All right, Greg, with that, thank you very much for joining us. Hopefully we can get you back here and you can give some updates as things move forward. It was a pleasure. I learned a lot, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Martin. Thanks for having me.